Good morning. Happy Thursday. So today, in Luke 7, we're reading about an account where a Pharisee invited Christ into his house to come have a meal. And so it makes a point to mention that he went into a Pharisee's house. And it says, "And behold, a woman in the city, which was a sinner." All right, Pharisee sinner. When she knew that Jesus sat at meat in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster box of ointment and stood at his feet behind him, weeping, and began to wash his feet with tears, and did wipe them with the hairs of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with ointment. So this was her action. It says, "Now when the Pharisee that had bidden him saw it, he spake within himself, saying, This man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that toucheth him, for she is a sinner." So, all right, that was her action. That was his attitude towards the whole situation. But Jesus answering him, because Jesus knows what he thought in his heart. So Jesus answering unto him said, "Simon, I have somewhat to say unto thee." And he said, "All right, saith on, master," say on. So this is what Christ said to him. He said, "There was a certain creditor which had two debtors. The one owed 500 pence and the other 50. Right? So there was a difference between amounts there. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him most? Who's going to love me more? Or the debtor more, rather. It says, Simon answered and said, I suppose that he to whom he forgave most. And he said unto him, Thou hast rightly judged. All right, so thou hast rightly judged. The one who loved most is the one who had the most sin forgiven. But my question is, how do you view your sin? How do you view yourself? This Pharisee clearly thought that he was worthy of having Christ in his home. He was worthy of entertaining the Son of God. He was worthy, he had something to offer, and so he gave somewhat. But this, because it calls him a Pharisee, and this woman calls her a sinner, she clearly didn't feel worthy at all. She just knew it was there, and she went and she took what she had. And so Christ is asking, who's going to forgive most? How about they both could have forgave the same? Or, excuse me. Who's going to love most? All right. How about they both could have loved the same? Our sacrifices for God, because that's what this was, is sacrifices when there's a surrendering or a suffering of loss to obtain something else. And what did he sacrifice? He sacrificed a seat at the table and a meal. That's what he was willing to sacrifice for Christ. So what did she sacrifice? Well, she sacrificed her savings, because this was of great value. This alabaster box of ointment was of great value, and she sacrificed it all for him. And then she sacrificed her pride. All right. That's showing a modest estimation of yourself when you humble yourself. And that's what she did. She got behind him. She bowed down. She wiped his feet with her tears, right? Anointed him with the ointment. She was worshiping Christ. She saw his worthiness instead of her own, and she went about with her own actions to worship Christ. And so, again, my question is, do we think we are God's gift to the kingdom? No, we're not. Christ is God's gift to the whole world. To whosoever will, he's the only gift, and we have to see him as worthy. But Christ honors sacrifices not in amounts, but in attitude, in motive, in meaning. And in this case, he makes it a point to mention love. He said, who would, love him the most? Love. Sacrifices are to come forth out of love. So listen to what Christ does. It says, and he said unto him, Thou hast rightly judged. So, and he turned to the woman. So I want you to imagine this in your mind. This is how I completely see it, because it says he turned to the woman and said unto Simon. So he's looking at her, speaking to this Pharisee. He said, Seest thou this woman? I entered into thine house. Thou gavest me no water for my feet, but she hath washed my feet with tears and wiped them with the hairs of her head. Remember, he's looking at her, saying this, talking to him. Thou gavest me no kiss, but this woman, since the time I came in, hath not ceased to kiss my feet. Looking at her, speaking to him. My head with oil thou didst not anoint, but this woman hath anointed my feet with ointment. Again, looking at her, speaking to him. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she loved much. But to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. And he said unto her, thy sins are forgiven. Thy sins are forgiven. Thy sins are forgiven, because her love was that motivator of her sacrifice. Her love was that motivation of her worship, of her humility, her meekness, her willingness to surrender that valuable box of ointment. And all he was willing to offer was a seat and a meal. And then it said, those that were at the table, let's not miss that last verse, said, they that sat at meat with him began to say within themselves, who is this that forgiveth sins also? And it brought up the thoughts of their own heart, their own pride, their own sin, their own wickedness. They should have realized that even though they didn't think that they had a great amount of sin, and they thought that she did because she's a well-known sinner in the city, that their sin was equally as big. You know, sin, all sin put Christ on the cross. It cost him everything, no matter how much you think you have or don't have. You have it. See it as big. See it as big, and see Christ as bigger, more worthy, more great. And again, he spoke to the woman, even after they were all saying in their heart, who is this that forgiveth sins also? It says, and he said to the woman, thy faith has saved thee, go in peace. This also reminds me of, like in James, how, you can say you have faith, but show me your faith by your works. So I can show you my faith by my works. Her love, her faith had action. It motivated her to worship God, to sacrifice for God, to humble herself, because her motives and meanings were love. So again, what's our attitude toward Christ? What's our attitude toward sin? What's our attitude toward worship? Like, who's worthy? We are not worthy to be in the presence of Christ, yet he allows us to, but he is all worthy of all glory, honor, and praise, right? Of all things. All right. Be blessed.